On Saturday night, Iran fired ballistic missiles at the single most important energy target in Israel. Not a military base, not a command center, not a radar installation, a refinery. The Bazan oil complex in Haifa Bay, the facility that processes more than half of Israel's entire domestic fuel supply. Diesel for trucks, kerosene for jets, gasoline for every vehicle moving soldiers, weapons, and supplies across the country. And the missile Iran chose for this strike was not random. It was the Kheibar Shekan, a weapon specifically engineered to defeat the kind of layered air defense systems Israel has spent decades building. A missile that can hide in a commercial truck, receive a launch order, and be airborne in minutes. A missile Israel's intelligence services cannot find until it is already flying toward them. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what Iran fired, why that specific weapon matters, and what this strike tells us about where this war is actually heading. Because the Haifa strike is not just a retaliation. It is a message written in fire about what Iran still has left. Here is what we know. Israel hit oil targets inside Iran for the first time in this conflict. 5 fuel depots across Tehran and Alborz provinces were struck in a single overnight operation. The Chevron depot on the outskirts of the capital ruptured. Oil ran into the streets. Walls of flame rose along a Tehran highway and were visible for kilometers. Black smoke merged with cloud cover, and when it rained the following morning, the water falling across Tehran was saturated with oil residue. Iran's Red Crescent classified it as highly dangerous. Environmental authorities told 10 million people to seal themselves indoors. Iran watched its own capital burn on live footage, and within minutes of those strikes landing, the IRGC published its response on SEPA News. The statement was direct. In response to targeting Tehran Refinery, we just targeted Haifa Refinery. The weapon system identified was the Kheibar Shekan. The strike was designated as the 27th wave of Operation True Promise 4. That sequencing matters. Israel hit Iranian oil. Iran hit Israeli oil. Same night, same hour. Both sides crossed the same line at the same time. This is no longer a war about military infrastructure. Both sides are now deliberately targeting the energy systems that keep each other's economies and militaries functioning. Every analyst who warned that symmetric escalation against oil facilities would be the most dangerous possible evolution of this conflict was right. It is no longer a warning. It is the current reality. Now we need to talk about the weapon. Because the Kheibar Shekan is the reason Iran has been able to sustain 27 waves of missile operations across 9 straight days of bombardment from 2 of the most advanced militaries on Earth. And almost nobody outside of defense circles understands why. The Kheibar Shekan is a 3rd-generation solid-fuel medium-range ballistic missile operated by the IRGC Aerospace Force. It was first revealed in February 2022 on the 43rd anniversary of the Iranian Revolution. The name translates to Breaker of Kheibar, a deliberate reference to the 7th century battle in which Muslim forces conquered a fortified settlement. The ideological signal in the naming is intentional, and it tells you something about how the IRGC frames this weapon internally. But ideology is not what makes this missile dangerous. The engineering is what makes it dangerous. The missile stretches 11.4 meters in length. Launch weight sits between 4.5 and 6.3 tons. The warhead carries roughly 550 kilograms of high explosive. Its officially stated range is 1,150 kilometers, enough to reach deep into Israeli territory from launch positions in western Iran. An upgraded variant reportedly extends that envelope to 1,800 kilometers. But range is not the story. The story is the fuel. Older Iranian systems like the Shahab series run on liquid propellant. Liquid fuel means hours of exposed preparation on a fixed launch pad. A massive vulnerability window where satellites, surveillance drones, and signals intelligence can locate the launcher and destroy it before it fires. That is how you dismantle a missile force without ever engaging the missile itself. You kill it on the ground before it can leave. The Kheibar Shekan eliminated that problem entirely. Solid fuel means the missile can sit loaded and ready inside a standard 10-wheel commercial truck chassis. It looks like a freight vehicle. It parks in a warehouse, a tunnel, an underground facility, or simply on a side road between mountains. It receives a launch order, and it can be airborne within minutes of that order being given. Iranian state sources have stated that preparation time dropped by a factor of 6 compared to its predecessors. That single engineering decision is the reason Iran has sustained nearly 30 waves of strikes without running out of mobile launchers. You cannot destroy what you cannot find. You cannot find what looks like cargo freight parked somewhere in a country the size of Iran. The warhead itself is a maneuverable re-entry vehicle built on a triconic airframe designed to maintain stability during aggressive terminal phase corrections. It carries satellite-aided guidance with the capability to adjust its trajectory all the way to the moment of impact. Terminal velocity estimates vary significantly. Some sources report Mach 2 to 3 on final approach. Others put the figure between Mach 7 and Mach 10. That discrepancy is itself significant. It suggests either deliberate ambiguity from Iranian sources designed to complicate Israeli defense planning, or genuine uncertainty among Western intelligence analysts about the system's actual performance envelope. Either way, the missile is specifically engineered to defeat layered air defense architectures. Which brings us to Haifa, and to a question neither government has answered clearly. Did the defenses hold? The Bazan Group oil refinery in Haifa Bay is not a secondary target. It is the single largest oil processing complex in the entire country. It sits on 526 acres, approximately 2 kilometers from residential neighborhoods. It processes imported crude and supplies between 50 and 60% of Israel's total domestic fuel needs: diesel, gasoline, kerosene for jet fuel, and cooking gas. Israel has only one other refinery, the Paz plant in Ashdod, operating at 110,000 barrels per day. If Bazan goes offline for an extended period, there is no domestic backup capable of filling that gap. And this was not the first time Iran targeted this exact facility. In June 2025, during the 12-day conflict, the same Bazan complex took a direct hit. 3 employees were killed. The on-site power station that generates steam and electricity for refinery operations was severely damaged. All facilities were shut down. Bazan reported the damage to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Trading in Bazan shares was suspended. The Energy Ministry estimated 2 weeks to restore basic operations. Pipeline systems, transmission lines, and downstream processing units all sustained damage in that strike. The refinery came back online, but the vulnerability had been recorded by every intelligence service in the region. When the IRGC selected the Bazan complex as the target for its 27th wave response, they were not guessing. They were returning to a target with a proven track record of being penetrable, a target whose structural weaknesses are already mapped, a target that had already demonstrated it could be taken offline. As of the latest verified reporting, Israeli military sources have not confirmed or denied the specific extent of damage from the March 8th attack. That silence mirrors June 2025 exactly, when it took days for the full picture to emerge through stock exchange filings and Energy Ministry assessments. If the pattern holds, expect a quiet Bazan disclosure to the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange within the next 48 to 72 hours. The numbers in that filing will tell you more than any military press briefing. Now step back and look at the full picture. Because the Kheibar Shekan strike on Haifa does not exist in isolation. Before this war started on February 28th, Brent crude was hovering around $70 per barrel. By Friday, March 7th, it had already surged to $92. That is a 32% increase in 9 days. By Sunday evening, after the depot strikes and the Haifa response landed, Brent crossed $100 a barrel for the first time since 2022, climbing past $107. American gasoline hit $3.41 per gallon, up 43 cents in a single week. Goldman Sachs analysts identified a $14 per barrel geopolitical risk premium already embedded in current prices before the refinery strikes even happened. The Strait of Hormuz carries 20 million barrels per day. That is 20% of all global oil supply passing through a single choke point. It is effectively closed. More than 150 vessels sit anchored in the Gulf with nowhere to go. Kuwait halted crude production entirely. Qatar declared force majeure on LNG contracts. South Korea disclosed it could exhaust its natural gas reserves within 9 days. Japan sources roughly 90% of its crude imports from the Middle East. India receives nearly 60% of its crude through the same strait. This is not a regional disruption. This is a global supply shock, and every consumer on the planet is already paying for it. Here is what the Kheibar Shekan strike on Haifa actually tells us. Most people watching this conflict assume Iran is running out of options. That 9 days of bombardment from the United States and Israel has degraded its capacity to the point where its missile waves are symbolic rather than strategic. The ballistic missile attack rate is down 90% from day one levels. The surface navy in the Arabian Gulf has been effectively eliminated. The supreme leader is dead. And yet, on the same night, Israel struck Iranian oil infrastructure for the first time in this war. Iran fired precision ballistic missiles at the exact facility that keeps Israeli jets fueled and Israeli trucks moving, within minutes of the Israeli strike's landing, using a weapon that cannot be tracked until it is already airborne, against a target it had successfully hit before. That is not the behavior of a military that has run out of options. That is the behavior of a military that has been waiting for a specific trigger and had a specific response already prepared. Israel's energy infrastructure was already in emergency mode before a single Kheibar Shekan warhead crossed into Israeli airspace. The offshore gas fields at Leviathan and Karish had been shut down as a precaution when the war started. Gas exports had likely been halted. The Paz refinery in Ashdod was already carrying a disproportionate share of the domestic processing load. When Iran's missiles arrived at Haifa Bay, they were not hitting a system operating at full capacity. They were hitting a system that was already stressed, already running on contingency protocols, and already one significant strike away from a serious supply crisis. Netanyahu responded to the depot strikes with a video statement. His core message was clear: an organized plan with many surprises, many more targets. The IRGC has now announced 27 waves of Operation True Promise 4. The sequential numbering is designed to sound imposing, but look at the weapons Iran has cycled through those waves. Kheibar Shekan, Fatah, Emad, Khorramshahr 4, and a previously unseen system designated Itmad that appeared in the most recent waves. Either Iran possesses deeper reserves than any outside estimate predicted, or it is burning through its remaining inventory in a calculated final surge before the next phase of this conflict begins. Neither answer is reassuring for anyone trying to model where this ends. The plan, according to Trump's own public statements, was 4 to 5 days. The reality is day 9 with no agreed end condition, no functional negotiating channel, and both sides now deliberately targeting each other's energy backbone in direct retaliation cycles. Iran's parliament speaker said this week that if the war continues on this trajectory, there will be neither a way to sell oil nor the ability to produce it. That is not propaganda. That is the Speaker of Parliament acknowledging on the record that Iran's energy sector faces an existential threat. And Netanyahu answered with many more targets. The Kheibar Shekan missile that flew toward Haifa Bay on Saturday night is the physical manifestation of the gap between those two positions. A weapon designed to survive everything Israel and America have thrown at Iran for 9 days. A weapon that can be hidden in a truck until the moment it is needed. A weapon aimed at the one facility that, if it goes offline, that leaves Israel without the fuel to keep this war going at its current pace. Both sides struck each other's oil infrastructure in the same hour. Neither side has defined what an acceptable end to this conflict looks like. That is not a war with an exit strategy. That is a war running on momentum. And the Kheibar Shekan does not negotiate.